As we get started working with our SLOs and measuring student progress, I want to show you a new tool that Edmodo has introduced called Snapshot. I'm going to do this in two parts. To begin with, I'm going to introduce how you make a snapshot, and then I'm going to show you in a separate video how to look at the results. Now, I'm going to sound a little bit like a salesperson for Edmodo on here because I am using their materials, but this is free. So it's a tool that can possibly help you measure student progress. At this point, a typical assessment schedule for a school may be that you have several benchmarks set up, and then at the end of the term or school year, there's a large high-stakes test, like our standardized testing or something like that. Well, Edmodo Snapshot would work in a sense in between these benchmarks that you have in that high-stakes test to test student progress. So like the name says, it gives you a snapshot of where your students are at. Now, currently, Edmodo is set up to give snapshots based on the Common Core for math and English language arts standards from grades 3 through 12. They hope to add more to these eventually, for example, like science, but this is still relatively new, something they were introducing at the end of the last school year and just formally getting out to everyone at the beginning of this school year. So it's still a work in progress. There are several ways that Edmodo can be used to show student progress. Obviously, as a pre-test to see what your students know already, a post-test, and then yes, you would certainly have your instruction in between those. Now, teachers can use these in a variety of different ways. For example, a teacher may decide to give a pre-test on one day, instruct on another day, and give the post-test on another day, so it's over several days. However, another teacher may decide that they, for example, an elementary classroom, may give the pre-test in the morning, instruction during the day, and the post-test is in the afternoon. And yet in other examples, for example, maybe even in a middle school or high school classroom, you give the pre-test at the start of the period, have your instruction during the period, and then you give the post-test at the end of the period. So in any case, you can monitor student progress. How well are they understanding that standard that you were aiming to accomplish in that particular time period? So here's an example of a ninth grade math class and how this teacher uses it. They gave this pre-test with certain math standards at the beginning of the unit. Then they divided their students into small groups based on how they did on the pre-test. Now, I'm not sure how much you're using the small groups in your Edmodo, and if that's something you would like some help with, I'd certainly be willing to do that, but you could easily assign small groups, and then meaning putting certain students in certain groups, and then you can direct your instruction to those groups rather than sending the same thing out to everyone. You'd have it more individualized. You could then give a snapshot to each small group that may be different. For example, maybe group 2 struggled with a certain area, so you gave them a different snapshot than group 1. Then obviously that would lead eventually to your unit tests. So this ninth grade math teacher felt like the students didn't have any surprises at the end of the unit test because they were being checked on a regular basis throughout. In an elementary classroom, she did this more of as a station level and a rotation. So while she was planning her lesson and was trying to get some centers based on literature, she had students take a snapshot based on the English language arts, and remember these go from grades 3 through 12, that she could get instant results on the student progress and then plan the lessons again to facilitate the centers based on how kids did on those particular snapshots that they had. So real quickly, how do you make a snapshot? So once you log into your Edmodo account, Snapshot is built right in. It's not a separate thing. You don't have to log into it separately. You'll see it over on the right-hand side to how to start your snapshot. From there, you pick a group that you want to assign this to, so you have to have your students in a group. And what Edmodo will do, this is how they initially did it, I'm thinking they probably still do this, they selected some certain standards based on the grade and whether you chose ELA or math. Now, if they came up with some standards that you didn't want those, you just certainly X those out, and then you can click to add more of your standards. Now, the issue I have personally is that I don't have these standards memorized, but I think some of you work with them more closely than I do, so that you could go through and pick those out more quickly, that if you were doing, you know, your third grade standards well enough that you could go out and pick those out for your math or your English and language arts. Again, it's a little more difficult for me. I have to kind of peruse the questions because I don't know what the standards are. From there, you give the snapshot a name, so just like you're naming your quiz. And from there, you can also give it a due date and set a time limit on here, and even give your students a note from there as well. You can preview the questions before you give them out. Now, I'm going to back up just a minute here. When you choose a standard, it automatically assigns 4 questions per standard. Okay? So if you picked one standard, it's going to be a 4-question quiz. If you pick 2 standards, it's going to be an 8-question quiz. Just because you're assigning the same standards to all your students doesn't mean they're going to get the exact same question. There is a little bit of a bank there so that they rotate those through. So this is the preview. So if you wanted to see what the quiz looked like before you gave it to your students, you could preview it, and then this will give you an example. So in this particular one, it's showing as a question 5 out of 12, and here is the reading that they would have to do, and then they have to answer the question. So it says read the passage and answer the following questions. And then you, as a person who's previewing it, you can just go on to the next question and see if this is what you want, this is what is meeting your needs. You can also preview a sample question right in here as well. So if you aren't really sure, like I said, what the standard is, you can preview it in this example as well. If you wanted to give the snapshot immediately, you just click on the Assign Now button. But you can also schedule these out. So if you were doing your lesson plans on Friday and you know that on Monday you wanted to give this quiz, or on Tuesday you wanted to give this snapshot, you can actually assign them for a later time as well. This is what the student would see from their end. So this is a student view. If you can see up here, and then this is Liam, the student. And when they open up the snapshot, this is going to allow them to start their snapshot, and this is going to give them some tips here as well. So they'll see things like, this is the name of the little snapshot or quiz that you're taking, this is how many questions it is, this is how much time you have. Now with the younger students, the time could be a real factor, so you may want to put it at a really large number so they aren't having problems with that. Sometimes with our older students, we like to actually bring that down a little bit so that they aren't keeping it open so other people can see that. And then obviously your question, your material, your question, and then submitting. Now this up here tells you what standards have already been met. So this student has already mastered 2 of the 3 standards in this particular area. So again, that's the name of it, tips that they have, and then they can start their snapshot from there. So here's an example of the question the student may have. Again, this is more of a short multiple choice question. Then they would click and go from there. Now, if the student decided to get out of the quiz for some reason, a message comes up that says you left the browser tab, please focus on the snapshot while you are taking it. That's also going to inform the teacher that they left as well. And that's, if you're worried about cheating at all, this is important. And it also warns them if they're leaving a question unanswered, so they can't go back. Sometimes with Edmodo quizzes you can go back to questions, and these you can't. You have to answer them at that particular time. Now for this particular student, this is telling them their ELA, so their English language arts, where they are and what snapshots they have to take. And then this is their math, so where they are with that particular schedule for their snapshots as well. I'm going to stop here. Then the next thing would be to look at the results. And I'm going to stop with this one and start a new one to look at results.